Hey, what's up, everybody? Of course, welcome everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Victorious Ones podcast, the place where gaming meets comics, meets sports, meets movies, as well as inspiration. Of course, I'm your host, King Von Jr. You can follow me on social media of course, on Twitter at 301 King Von Jr. You can follow the show's Twitter page at Victory Pod One. You can also follow, of course, me on Instagram at Mr. King Von Jr. You can follow the show's Instagram page at Victorious Ones Podcast. I'm also the social media producer for Perfect Plex Talk Radio, hosted by friend of the program, Mike Knox, on Mondays at 6 p.m. And of course, thank you very much, for those that are, that are tuned in, tapped in, watching by way of Twitter, X, whatever. And of course, if you want to watch on YouTube, of course, it's youtube.com/ at Von West Virginia. Please make sure like and subscribe for more great content on the way. And so, of course, I hope everyone enjoyed the Labor Day weekend, because I know I did. And of course, obviously, of course, for me to cap it off, on Monday I went to the Washington Nationals game. I spent my Labor Day, watching the Nats play. And of course, I'm glad to see that they won. You know what I mean? And even though they didn't hit any home runs, but it was definitely a hard fought game. Sometimes it happens. But other than that, I had a great experience. You know what I mean? Great weather, to end off summer on a high note. You know what I mean? And so as far as that, like I said, and so that's the main thing. And I know that the NFL season will officially be underway starting off tomorrow. And definitely on a huge note with the Dallas Cowboys. Like I said, Dallas Cowboys versus the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, the Cowboys lost, Pro Bowl, linebacker, defensive player, edge rusher, Micah Parsons. Since he's now with the Green Bay Packers, now going number one, literally number one. So in terms of that, that's definitely a whole lot to process. But it's a new day. It's time to move forward. How we will look in the season, only time will tell. So with the way this game is, I think it's going to set the tone for the way we look moving forward. That's all I'll say about that. And also, speaking of that, Netflix, as I just got finished talking about, with the Cowboys having their documentary. It's amazing. As I said, it's the NFL's version of The Last Dance. But now Netflix is going to show a documentary about the Buffalo Bills. Whatever, for whatever that's worth. But I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to be invested in it. For those of you that want to, hey, that's all up to you. But now I'm going to talk about some more pressing issues when it comes to Lucha Wrestling. This past Sunday actually was WWE Clash of Paris, as this has been announced as the final PLE, or pay-per-view as I still like to call it, on Peacock, as now WWE is making the transition to ESPN, with the first PLE on ESPN being WrestlePalooza, which takes place on Saturday, September 20th, at 7 p.m. And just recently, I saw, of course, I saw the commercial for WrestlePalooza, and it being advertised and promoted with ESPN. I said, yes, official. They have made that turn, and so, especially in an era of a streaming era, an era of nothing but streams, subscriptions, to whether it's to ESPN or at least, the Disney bundle pack, Netflix, Peacock, what I mean, like Amazon Prime for anything else, what have you. I mean, this is an era of just the cash grab. You know what I mean? Like, pretty much, like, regardless of what the quality looks like, it's all about, you know what I mean? Um, so yeah, so that's what that is. And so you left with the choice of whether or not to keep cable. May reduce your cable bill. I don't know, but yeah, as far as that, uh, it's if anything, it certainly just remains to be seen. You know, what this is going to turn into, and how this going to play out. I know that the announcement has been polarizing, to say the least, or at least uh, the best way I could say it would be divisive. You know what I mean? And the thing is, I could tell that you know they're making the transition officially because of the connection on Peacock. Or at least the way the signal was having technical issues, and it was just like lagging, and at least as far as all those things. Uh, so I don't know if anybody else dealt with it, but I definitely dealt with it. At least on my end, and so that was the signal to me that that they're officially distancing themselves from Peacock, and they're going all the way with with this ESPN merger. You know what I mean? And so of course, without further ado, I'm going to go into the results for Clash in Paris. And when I say that this PLE did not disappoint in the very least, I absolutely mean it. You know what I mean? And so it was definitely uh, something you could say exceeded certain expectations. And especially when the opening match was what it was. The opening match, we saw Roman Reigns versus Bronson Reed, the Tribal Chief versus the Tribal Thief. You have the Ula Fowler versus the Shula Fowler. You know what I mean? And so Bronson Reed was determined to make an even bigger name for himself at the expense of a living legend such as Roman Reigns. And can you imagine how much higher Bronson's stock would have been, had he gotten the W over the best modern day champion that we've had, the face of of our modern era, if you will. I know everybody wants to say Cody, but the thing is, I'm talking about in terms of like it's even longer than that, especially because of Roman's historic title reign. You know what I mean? So, like I said, Bronson is going up against a resume that had tremendous pedigree. A resume that includes 1,316 days as WWE champion, Universal champion, whatever, just the company champion. So if anything, Bronson's found legacy at this point. And so, I know that there are people who were kind of mixed in terms of the pacing of the match. Some fellas, like dragging on and picked up whatever later on, whatever the case is. But I will say that it definitely built Bronson more to being like this force of nature, if you will. Like irresistible force meets the immovable object. You know what I mean? So there are times when Bronson really felt like more of a movable object. Um, even though like I say, even though Roman, like I said, when he's go face to face, definitely stands over him. But the thing is, the way that Bronson wrestled, like I said, the thing that there are times Roman was having his share of struggles, and there are times where it seemed like Roman was running into a brick wall. I was like, wow, and so like if anything, Bronson to a certain extent kind of gives me early Vader vibes, between like New Japan and WCW. He's not on that level. I I wouldn't go that far just yet. Even though I know that there are people who have uh, have certain hot takes regarding that. Who give a hot take about that. I'm not gonna go that far yet. I'm not gonna jump off the deep end just yet. Uh, but Bronson is definitely on a great track. And so so this match definitely showcased that. You know, and so and just like without further ado, um, the match definitely had a lot of near pinfalls. Starting with Bronson, he countered a Superman punch from Roman into a combo, into a combo for a near fall. Let's just say if we're using 2K analogies, you say that the Bronson press triangle. You know what I mean? Triangle or square. But of course, um, Bronson's jagged edge forced Roman to kick out at the last second. Reigns earned the pinfall in the end at a Superman punch, a Super Simone drop from the top rope, and a spear. So Roman threw everything that he could at Bronson, right? And so after the match, Roman gets back into the ring, and as he gets back into the ring, he sees Paul Heyman, and Heyman puts up the one, saying he still acknowledges Roman as a tribal chief, only for Roman to choke Heyman out. You know what I mean? Choke him out with a guillotine. To finally reclaim the shoes that Bronson had stolen. And I like how Roman got the shoes out the way, signed them for the fans. You know what I mean? They like that. Like I said, I like that part. And so of course only then signed his shoes to the audience. Only right before Braun Breaker speared him through the French announce table. And when I say that Braun Breaker flattened this dude, I mean he absolutely crushed him out. Man, the way that he obliterated Roman Reigns, if anything, Braun Breaker is definitely starting to make it. So I would say I have this vision for faction. The one who has the biggest upside, the one who I feel is going to really benefit the absolute most out of this long term, it will be Braun Breaker. We see that a match with him and Roman is definitely on the horizon. As he Roman with multiple spears, and so and then Bronson Reed stepped in and delivered multiple tsunamis. When they sent Roman out the ring on a stretcher. And the thing about it was that back when Roman was a champion, I felt as though somebody who would be a great successor to him, in the long run, someone who could pass the torch to, would have been Braun Breaker. Like the thing is at the time, Braun wasn't quite ready yet. You know what I mean? And so, but yeah, as far as this, it would definitely be a huge elevation, for Braun Breaker moving forward, and to have that notch under his belt, to say they face, say they face someone the caliber of a Roman Reigns. That's tremendous in and of itself. So right after that, we have the tag team championship match, the YX6 versus the Street Profits, and for those that may not know, don't really understand, say video game terminology, if you will, video game references. Of course, it's been announced that there's a new Borderlands video game coming out. So when the Street Profits came out, Montez Ford and Angelo Dawkins, when it came out, they had the Borderline, mask. You know what I mean? And so I was like, oh, I'm not Borderline, but the Borderlands mask. When I saw them wearing those masks from Borderlands, I was like, oh, okay, then. I definitely see where they want to go. Like, if anything, that they're using this match to choose violence because because Borderlands is utterly one of the most, you know, vicious, games that one could probably ever play. You know what I mean? So that if anything, that was a message saying that they were out for blood against the YS6. And the night before that on SmackDown, Bo Dallas did that promo backstage with the Street Profits, and the way that Montez looked at him, you know, what I mean, it's just like, the way that Montez looked, during that segment, you know, what I mean, it's just like you almost thought he got hypnotized and turned to a zombie or something. I was like, well, and the thing is, we look at the body language between him and Dawkins, even in the match. The way that they just, put the arms up in front of each other, just getting them to back off. And Dawkins, he even said something on Twitter talking about how he was running out of patience. I was like, oh. And, I know that they've been teasing, for the longest time. People online, they want to see Montez turn solo and see, that the Street Profits break up. And I know that recently that they were on O'Shea Jackson Jr.'s No Context Wrestling podcast, and they were saying that that they were never going to turn heel, and I mean, or rather, they were saying they're never going to break up. And let's say O'Shea had jokingly said that anytime say something along the lines of somebody says that something's not going to happen, you believe that or if they say one thing, the opposite is going to happen. Whatever the case was, he was like, he was joking and said, expect to see it, Street Profits break up in a Montez solo run, whatever, it's kind of like joke along with it. But the thing is, I wouldn't put it past him that would be inevitable, if you will. Shout out to Thanos. Be inevitable is eventually going to take place, in the sense that we may see a Street Profits breakup sooner rather than later. So it's going to be the second black tag team since the New Day, that is like a recent memory that had a breakup. The very team that prides itself on staying together, and especially like I said on the O'Shea podcast interview, how they were just seeing how they were adamant on staying together, and not having to break up and all this other stuff like that. I believe that only by the time we turn around, it's going to end up being the opposite. And so if anything, I pay attention. I observe and pay attention to what's going on. And several people, including give a shout out to Lovely LeBeau. Excuse me, I don't want to mess her name up, but Lovely LeBeau has even mentioned herself. They even campaigned for Montez to go solo, especially after that Elimination Chamber match back in 2022. And the way that this dude was able to shine, I mean, it's mind-boggling that they hadn't pulled the trigger by this point ever since then. At the same time, the team has shared sentiments, excuse me, about staying together no matter what, But if anything, what happened with the New Day, certainly was a wake-up call. If a team as legendary as them, who have stuck around for as long as they have, became victims to the breakup angle, anything is possible for anybody. But I will say that like I said, of course, the YS6 retaining the WWE tag titles after Joe Gacy and Dexter Lumis hit the play on Montez to get the pin. So the match definitely had its fair share of near falls, and the most exciting part was when Montez flew over the turnbuckle post, splashed onto the YS6 members, and despite tension between Montez and Angelo, particularly at the start of the match, as I mentioned before. The Street Profits definitely were made a tandem, but one has to question and be curious, like how much longer is this going to last? So that's the way I see it. And right after that, we have the Women's Intercontinental Championship match. Nothing anybody really asked for it in the first place, to be honest. Whatever, I still stand 10 toes down with that. We have the Women's Intercontinental Championship match between Becky Lynch and Nikki Bella, of all people. So originally there was going to be another women's championship match between Naomi and Stephanie Bakir, for the women's world championship on Raw, but obviously those plans end up getting cut up and thrown in the trash. Only because of Naomi's pregnancy announcement, so they definitely had to call an audible with that. You know what I mean? So that's the reason why we have what we have, and let's just say that nobody really wanted this match in 2025, if not ever. To make Nikki Bella look like a sympathetic figure, I ain't really buying it. Especially when it comes to someone who has a much deeper, say, wrestling pedigree and resume and everything like that, who's just much higher up on GOAT status. Someone like Becky Lynch. Come on now, clearly, the women's revolution, the rise of the horsewomen, was there to replace the Divas era of the Bella Twins. That's why three out of the four horsewomen made the debut the way they did, because that was symbolically letting the fans know that the Total Divas Bella Twins era had officially become a thing of the past. So now at this point we're dipping back into nostalgia, and I'm sure somebody's going to be like, hey, what about Trish Stratus? Still going out there almost 50 years old. You know what I mean? Even though she was the era, the era that preceded the Divas era, and I know that people put Nikki on Trish's level. Like, nah, from a universal standpoint, they are not the same. And plus, the thing is, Trish at near 50, has put on far better matches than what Nikki's been putting out. Like, it's not even close. I mean, look at what, for example, Trish versus Becky. Come on, now. It's light years ahead of, Nikki versus Becky. It's not even close. And so, I mean, this match, was continued to further prove the point. So, like I said, as far as this match, it was definitely fair share of missed time moments, and Becky quickly, covered up with some quick pinfall attempts. And the pace was meant to be fast, and of course, with Nikki taking a fight to Becky before the champion ended up taking over, and the crowd was right. Even though Becky was a heel, if anything, the audience and parents they understood the assignment, so they favored, just like myself, they favored Becky Lynch over Nikki Bella. Ultimately, their favor got the win. So to get the pin, Becky Lynch slipped out of an armbar. Nikki's version of the disarmer, slipped out of that and quickly got Nikki's shoulders on the mat to obtain the championship. So this match definitely had its fair share of missed time moments, and so if there was one match that was the weakest link out of them all, I would say it was this one. And I normally don't say that, especially when it pertains to a Becky Lynch match. You know what I mean? If anything, usually Becky's matches are of a much higher caliber. You know what I mean? But this one, especially considering who her opponent was in this match, like, it wasn't him. But then things pick back up. Business picks back up. with the good old-fashioned Donnybrook match between Rusev and Sheamus. And this was a complete 180 of that women's IC title match. No shade to women's wrestling. I absolutely love women's wrestling myself. Excuse me. But this ain't it. This wasn't it. But yeah, like I said, as far as next up with the Donnybrook match between Rusev and Sheamus, it was definitely an incredible match. Sheamus and Rusev definitely beat the heck out of each other, beat the brakes out of each other. So of course the match was violent, brutal, thrilling, all in one, all that you need. We saw Sheamus hit multiple road kicks, including one as Rusev was about to attack with the shillelagh, and I definitely like Sheamus's multiple hits to Rusev's chest. As fans, count in French. I was like, oh, you know what I mean? So Sheamus definitely had the crowd on his side. So as far as that, I mean, and like I said, not only that, but a huge highlight of this match, a great spot that I definitely enjoyed the most, was when Sheamus still in that barrel with Rusev on his back, and he delivered white noise by jumping off the barrel onto two tables. I was like, oh, they are bringing it. They definitely brought it and then some. And not only that, but of course, Rusev, Rusev slammed Sheamus into that bar, if you will, as they call it. And so, in the end, Rusev ends up responding by hitting the accolade on top of the barrels. And, like I said, Sheamus threw Sheamus through the bar table. That's what it was. He was thrown through the bar table before finally using the accolade across Sheamus's face and causing him to tap out. And of course Michael Cole even mentioned this. This was only the second time in Sheamus' career that he had tapped out. That's highly impressive. And it was definitely great considering who he tapped out to. It was a great win for Rusev and a very entertaining match. You want to talk about match of the year candidate? I definitely put that somewhere up there. The next step we have, I'd like to say, we have John Cena versus Logan Paul, or as Michael Cole would say, as Michael Cole said it best before the match. He said the paragon of virtue, Chris Jericho's on it, by the way. The paragon of virtue versus the parasite. We have the old guard versus the algorithm. I said couldn't say any better. It's one of the best, I guess, build up with nicknames since the Irresistible Force meets the immovable object, as I said before. This match was a battle of the old guard versus the algorithm. And like I said, this is definitely a spectacular matchup. And like I said, by the way, I want to give a shout out to Shawn Michaels for initially training Logan as he first got into the ring, especially back in that match against Roman. So as far as that, if anything, Logan has learned from one of, if not the absolute certified best in the ring, bar none. Now, do I agree with Logan having a higher rating than Shawn on the game? Absolutely not. But the thing is, that influence is definitely felt, in Logan's repertoire and his moveset. So like I said, it's a spectacular matchup, one of, if not the best matches of the night. Otherwise, and so I was like, man, like I said, that was definitely, like I said, one of the better matches. And so, so of course, I mean, after Logan comes out, or rather, of course, John Cena's entrance was everything. To realize that that he is on the tail end of his career. And I will say, on Friday, let me backtrack. For Friday Night SmackDown, I do like the way that John Cena apologized to that kid and made things right, right before turning back to Logan and taking care of his business. But yeah, like I said, just that see that reconciliation, that apology, making amends, before your career's over, that's transformation right there. You know what I mean? That's why Cena is so inspirational. But like I said, of course, in between ropes, Cena pulling out all the stops to get a win. Even calling back as Cena Kanrana, the Cena Destroyer, Cena Kanrana, Cena destroying all the moves well outside the 5 moves of Doom repertoire of his moveset. So especially back in 2015, like Cena between 20 like post 2012, John Cena was pulling all kind of rabbits out of his hat, and he just expanded his moveset, to the point because I even remember back in that 2013 when he had the match with CM Punk on Raw, where that was when he pulled out the Cena Karana. He's even done, like I said, the Cena Destroyer, which is his version of the Canadian Destroyer. I said, oh, yeah, Cena's not playing around. He has consistently showed that he's more than that. Than that entire cliche of 5 moves of Doom. Because John Cena is a student of the sports entertainment system of wrestling, and what I mean by that is when it comes to the WWE style, right? Less is more. So the less moves, that you use in your arsenal, or rather you go to your main go-to moves, that means more. Like if anything, less moves, and the more character that you have, the better story that you could tell. But in this case with Cena, um, especially in the later part of his career, especially since he had accumulated so much, you just eventually got to a point where it was like, this is just a proving ground for himself, to remind the fans that he can actually wrestle, outside of his gimmick, outside of his persona, and everything like that. So yeah, like he definitely showed that. And like I say, and the thing is, I mean, Cena went as far as to even use, his rival AJ Styles finishing move, the Styles Clash. I was like, oh, when I saw Cena hit a Styles Clash, I was like, oh yeah, they are grappling, they're going to wrestle. You know what I mean? This, as Kaz would say, is for the graps. You know what I mean? Like anytime Cena used a Styles Clash, oh yeah, they are here to wrestle. Like this is not a game. And of course, he reversed Logan Paul's attempts at a 5-knuckle shuffle and an AA. And the finish came when John Cena hit not 1 but 2 AAs in quick succession for the win. Much like you do on WWE 2K when you have do like consecutive attitude adjustments. But yeah, pretty much the same thing. So from bell to bell, this was absolutely terrific match. And of course, this for Logan Paul, this definitely proved the main event, a marquee, PLE. Even though he showed that in the match against Roman Reigns, Crown Jewel 2022, I believe it was. But of course, in the end, we have. So, like I said, in the end, we also have the World Heavyweight Championship match, Fatal 4-Way, Seth Rollins versus Jey Uso versus CM Punk versus LA Knight. It was a very energetic, high-paced main event. Definitely has fair share of moments. As CM Punk crashed to the table after being punched by LA Knight, and then launched himself into a commentary table where he missed the elbow drop. So the end, in the end, we saw that CM Punk nearly hit the GTS, go to sleep on Seth Rollins, only for a masked person, someone with a mask, to hit Punk with a low blow. And when they unveiled the mask, it was Becky Lynch. I was like, oh, Becky's throwing herself in this now. Oh shoot, okay, so she has been making multiple enemies at the same time. So I would say, that the thing with, Nikki's definitely, I would say, is behind her, at this point. something nobody asked for. That's another story. So of course, I see, Becky Lynch with a low blow on CM Punk. That Seth Rollins followed up with a curb stomp onto the chair and secured the pinfall to retain the World Heavyweight Championship. And CM Punk and Seth Rollins always have incredible matches. And of course, the saga is definitely going to continue beyond Sunday's match. So yes. So as far as that, I would say that this definitely a great farewell to I could just say the Peacock era of WWE. So, but like I said, outside of some of the technical issues, just like whatever. But other than that, it's pretty impressive. But before I go any further, let me go and backtrack because, the bigger highlights of SmackDown. And as a matter of fact, let me go ahead. I'll go back. I'll backtrack to SmackDown in a minute. But if I were to give this a belt grade, if I were to give this PLE a belt grade, I would give it 3.5 out of 5. Seth Rollins World Heavyweight Championship reigns. Especially since Seth was a central figure for this event, especially for the main event. So that's what my belt rating would be. But I want to give a backtrack, real quick to SmackDown because a lot happened on the Go Home show. And the biggest highlight of them all was that Sami Zayn defeated Solo Sikoa to win the U.S. title. And so Sami is officially one title away from becoming a Grand Slam champion. He is one world title away from being a Grand Slam champion. For the people that that want to call him Sammy Hogan, I'm not going there with that whatsoever. For one, Hogan never even sniffed or even wanted to sniff a mid-card title. His thing was that doesn't work for me, brother. So I'm not even going to go there with that. But yeah, like I said, Sami Zayn was one. So as far as solo strength advantage early against the underdog, eventually Sami turned the tide with his technique and speed and experience, right? And so of course we saw JC Mateo and Tonga Loa Sikoa's MFTs as they clipped Sami's wings ringside, if you will, kind of try to shut him down at ringside, and Solo Sikoa's numbers advantage spurred Jacob Fatu and Jimmy Uso to level the playing field. As Sami Zayn responds to a Samoan drop of an exploded suplex, and of course two Luva kicks to seal the victory. And so your winner and officially the new United States champion is Sami Zayn. It was also announced that Jade Cargill will become the number one contender to face Tiffany Stratton again. So of course she's going to have a rematch, even though she lost clean at SummerSlam with no interference, no BS, no foolishness, none of that. So the fact that that Jade had that loss, that was really, that was definitely a blow to her stock. Not only did she lose, but the way it happened, it's just like at this point, you're really being warned. If anything, that women's rosters really kind of running out of options at this point. It's just like Bianca. It's like Bianca can't heal soon enough. Because you want to talk about a void that needs to be filled. That right there, speaks to it. And it was great, as I said before, to see John Cena apologize to the kid and say that he was having a very bad day. And when you have a bad day, you say some things that you don't mean. You go back to that person and apologize, and that's exactly what he did to that fan. Like I as far as I was like, glad to see they did that. So as far as that, and of course, Logan Paul trying to dismiss John Cena, low brow humor, but Cena wanted to soon be opponent. He gets head straight before it was too late, and so obviously it was too late. You know what I mean? So in other matches, we saw Alexa Bliss defeat Chelsea Green by way of pinfall and the roll up. After the match, Chelsea Green out fire laid out Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair. So of course, Friday's women's tag match was canceled after Chelsea Green Alba Fire attacked Charlotte Flair backstage as they injured her leg. Like, come on now. Like, she just came back. Like, why do this again? Malachi Black and Damian Priest provoked each other in dual vignettes. We saw Michin defeated Kiana James by way of pinfall roll up. Earner's shot at the Women's United States Champion. Julia. So after the match, Julia attacked Michin. Drew McIntyre fled from a brawl with Randy Orton. The Street Profits defeated Melo Don Miz with a sky-high neckbreaker combo on Melo. We saw Jay Cargill inform Tiffany Stratton and SmackDown GM Nick Aldis anointed Jade as the number one contender for Stratton's Women's Championship, as I said before. So that is the rundown for SmackDown, and now it's time for me to do the rundown of Monday Night Raw. So the show opened with CM Punk wanted to meet with Seth Rollins at the only way in and out of the arena, right at the entrance at the garage, the entrance for the garage. So then, of course, we saw Adam Pearce question before leaving alone, and then of course Punk eventually asked Adam where SmackDown's going to be on Friday, and he told him it's going to be in Chicago. So Punk loved it, Punk loved that part. You know what I mean? So of course Jay Uso then kind of in promo before being interrupted by LA Knight, blame Jay for not putting Rollins to the table of Clash in Paris, allowing himself, Uso and CM Punk to battle it out for the World Championship. So eventually, the argument was interrupted by Braun Breaker and Braun Reed with the challenge for a tag team match in the main event. And of course, even before the main event, we saw that Adam Pearce told CM Punk they received confirmation that Rollins was in the building. And CM Punk went to the ring and was confirmed by Becky Lynch, who ran down Punk as not being on the same level as her husband, Seth Rollins. Seth eventually appeared and dared Punk to make his way up to the entrance ramp. But, of course, Becky stopped Punk in his path to go up there and stop him. So as far as that, Becky definitely shut that down. And so after Seth Rollins walked off, Becky continued to slap Punk repeatedly over and over, leaving him to say that he would make Rollins and Lynch regret their actions. And so, the way that Punk just got humiliated, I was like, man, and I know there's speculation of when to see AJ Lee return. With the way her neck injury happened, I think it's a very slim to none chance of AJ making her return. I know that that one can only dream and one can only hope. But if I were AJ, that's a gamble that I would not be willing to take. You know what I mean? So, so as far as that, so as far as that's concerned, it's just like it's kind of like that's one of those things. That's if anything, so like I say, if anything, I just don't see it. I really do not see it whatsoever. I'll tell you one thing. Becky definitely would not have tried that with one Randall Keith Orton. Because Randy Orton is an equal opportunist. Or rather, let me put it this way. Randy Orton is a man who believes in women's equality. And what I mean by that is that the RKO is ready to eat for everyone. Any and everyone can get it, male or female. So, the RKO has no, discrimination bias. The RKO does not discriminate. The RKO has no gender bias, no race bias, no nothing. You know what I mean? So, case in point, look at Randy's track record when it comes to women RKOs. Ask Nia Jax, Alexa Bliss, Stephanie McMahon, Stacey Keebler, Beth Phoenix. That was hilarious. You know what I mean? And fabulous movie. That was well deserved. Orton's a hero for that. So, like I said, if Orton were in those shoes, which he wasn't, that'd be a different story. It wouldn't even be a conversation. But for Punk to, to sort of get chunked out like that. Some people would say that he no-sold it because he didn't fall or whatever. But come on now. Now they're making it more obvious that Becky involved, even though, last time her and Seth, were involved in a couple storyline and intergender storyline. Her match did not turn out so well. When it came to Baron Corbin and Lacey Evans. That's something I'm pretty sure that Becky and Seth would rather limp down. But like I said, as far as that, like I said, like I said, more than likely, I definitely don't see, don't see AJ making a comeback. So he has to find some other options that are on the roster. But in other Monday Night Raw highlights, we saw the Kabuki Warriors from Judgment Day and Roxanne Perez and Raquel by way of submission when Asuka caught Roxanne and Asuka a lot. Before the match, Io Sky offered to help after apologizing for the trio's confrontation last week, but Asuka said they would handle things. And later, Asuka promised Io that she'll have a beat Stephanie Brock here. And we saw, the backstage segment, things got heated between Asuka and Rhea Ripley. When Asuka said nobody's ready for it, including Rhea. I was like, oh, Asuka's definitely gotten in her bag. We saw Adam Pearce announced that Io Sky and Stephanie Brock here would battle for the Women's World Championship. And the title was vacated, obviously because of Naomi's pregnancy announcement. Leaving Sky, who was already slated to challenge Naomi, and Valkyria, who won the number contender battle World Evolution, as obvious choices to crown the new champion. Then we have Finn Balor defeating Dragon Lee by way of pinfall with the coup de grace. And JD Bobblehead ran interference for Finn later in the match. We saw the Viking Warriors and Penta defeat the New Day and Grayson Waller by way of pinfall. And Penta hit Xavier Woods with the Mexican Destroyer. Adam Pearce talked to Lyra Valkyria about Bayley, leaving Valkyria confused when he said he's spoken to Bayley, and she sounded great, but it said some pretty confusing things. So you definitely tell that Bayley's hearing those voices in her head, and they counsel her to understand. They talk to her, shout out to Randy Orton once again. So as far as that, of course, then Valkyria then asked for a match with him from Judgment Day, which Adam Pearce, of course, granted. And then, of course, for the Intercontinental Championship, Dirty Dom Dominic Mysterio defeated AJ Styles by way of pinfall after Frog Splash to retain the title. AJ seemingly had the match won, only for a run at Americana to run into the interference and set up Mysterio for the win. If anything, I would say that outside of this whole Judgment Day gimmick, Dominic has been making a great name for himself. Outside of Judgment Day, when we look at AAA and anything else, what they say, what they take the chains off him, if you will. It's like just let him run loose. Just let him be himself. Exactly. As far as gimmick aside, if he does in the ring, it's exceptional. So as far as that, of course, we saw that Jimmy Uso put into Vision's attack on Jey Uso. So we saw that Paris got, just love Jay Uso, so as far as that's concerned. But yeah, so as far as that, that's pretty much it when it comes to my review of Monday Night Raw. And last but not least, it's time for my review of NXT. And I like how NXT got off to a high start with the grudge match between Lash Legend and Jada Parker. Shawn Michaels is like, I'm pretty sure Shawn Michaels is like, you know what, I know they're going to rip each other's heads off. Let's just, open the, like just open the show with them, with them getting all the anger out and keep it moving forward. That's what he did with Lash Legend versus Nia Jax. Only this time, uh, Lash was on the other end. Instead of getting pinned, she's got her arm raised in victory. But so as far as that, like I said, it was great to see this match, and it was definitely two women. There's sights on the NXT Women's Championship, and with ample amounts of tension between them, it squared off in the opener. And so, of course, the Lash Legend overpowered Jada early, but rapidly improving. Parker definitely seized control of the match, and she worked, of course, like I said, just having the advantage, and it just keeping Lash grounded, former WNBA star, someone who's just a natural powerhouse. True giant when it comes to women's wrestling. No offense, but yeah, like I said, that's no easy work. That's no easy task. So Albert, the former metaphor teammate, fought her way back into the match, and of course, shut down Jada Parker during the commercial break. And so if Jada Mountain come back to try the hypnotic move, but let the Lash counter and deliver a backbreaker to her. So moments later, this is when the tide really turned. As that as the action spilled out to the floor, and of course it was especially after Lash Legend kicked out, and she was making her way out of the ring. Of course, Jada grabbed her hair and tried to pull her, so Lash ended up pulling Jada out the ring. Like I said, that's when the fight spilled out to the floor. And so, of course, Jada missed her move. Lash Legend hit her with a big boot pump kick, and that's when she hit the Lash extension onto the mouse tape. And so, of course, Booker T, you just see him getting out of the way, smart man. Only for them to go back into the ring, and Lash hit the Lash extension for a second time in the ring. Of course, to get the 1-2-3 victory. You know what I mean? And of course, that's it. Lash won. I was glad. Only her victory lap wouldn't last long. As Jada attacked her after the match, and of course, did her a hip attack to Lash, and sent her through the barricade. I'm like, ain't no way Jada's that strong. That's crazy. Of course, we see Jada's definitely gaining popularity. So they delivered a hypnotic move and drove Lash to the barricade. And of course, as Vic Joseph, the issues between them were far from over. And so of course, like I said, I definitely want to see more of what they're going to do, especially with no mercy on the horizon. And then we saw there was a tense confrontation between Jordan Grace and Blake Monroe, which definitely earned the ire of Kylie Armstrong, who expressed new issues with Jordan Grace, which led to a match later that night. And we see Javon Evans come out and talk about how he fell short against Obafemi, and just feeling sorry for himself. Only for Josh Briggs to be like, you know what, that ain't it's gonna like I said, only for Josh Briggs, to come out and be like, you know what, I'm not with that. And so this was, Josh Briggs' way. This is Josh's way of giving motivation, if you will. Uh, I mean, and just like, and like I said, he wasn't with, Javon feeling sorry for himself, and so of course, like I said, Javon fought through emotions, and only for Josh Briggs to come out. Well, first they gave an Undertaker tease, by playing his music, and of course that's when Briggs came out, and he was like, oh, he was like, we expecting somebody else, and so of course that's when like I said, that's when, that's when he insulted Javon and gave him quote unquote the quote unquote old timer talk, taking shots at him, for what his generation is about, and of course when he's only 32 himself, which is kind of hilarious, talking like an old timer, like, dude, come on now. I mean, like, you're not that far removed from him. Like what are we doing? I think it's funny, that millennial, we talk to Gen Z, like trying to sound like an old timer, like, nah, you're not there. You're not there yet. Like, just chill out with that. But I definitely see, Josh's point, where and of course, he assaulted Javon, delivered a cheap shot, that knocked Javon down, and of course took a steel chair and gave him a choke slam. He choke slammed Javon onto that chair. You know what I mean? So I was like, man, and of course, with that said, of course, it definitely got Josh Briggs, tremendous heat, especially with the Undertaker tease, where he trolled the fans. Um, so if anything, I mean, if NXT plays the cards right, they'll have already made he'll champion him. Hopefully gets his main roster call up. So as far as that's concerned, I was like, yeah, like I said, I mean, Josh Briggs, talk talk Javon down and just level him and crush him. I was like, man, and at the same time, he's making some great valid points. I mean, the way his approach, you question it, but yeah, I definitely see where he was coming from with that. Looking back on it, but then we have the Speed Women's Championship, Zia Brookside versus Candice LeRae, and the winner of that match is Candice LeRae. Then we have Trick Williams calling himself the greatest, NXT superstar of all time, and saying, that the NXT stars from the past don't want nothing to do, with NXT now, and they rather, they rather chill out and vacation in Paris and stuff like that. Pretty much saying that, that the past NXT stars have gotten too big time to to even be bothered with it now, and it's especially considering now that Trick is also the TNA champion. So but then Triple later said, you know what, I don't blame him either. And of course Trick was claiming he was different from past stars. And of course he admitted that once he receives an offer from Raw SmackDown to go to the main roster, he would leave and wouldn't care about the brand either. That's only for DIY to show up to Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa, interrupting him to a huge ovation. And of course, marking 10 years since their NXT debut, and the crowd's welcome home chants showered their ongoing passion for DIY. And Ciampa questioned Triple H's assertion, that he's the greatest superstar in NXT history, time his own status as a two-time world champion, Gargano's 3 runs as North American champion. And of course, I like how Gargano, made references to the NXT stars of the past. We said it didn't matter if you were Demon, Finn Balor, or Hugger, being Bailey, being undisputed era, or glorious, referring to Bobby Roode. I was like, okay, maybe, as Captain America said in Avengers, I understood that reference. So as far as that, if anything, I definitely like the segment, and of course with the double super kick on Trick, and really putting him in his place. And that's not the first time that Trick had to get home, because, of course, not too long ago, Undertaker did that choke slam. But yeah, as far as that backstage, Ava announced a triple threat number 1 contenders tag match featuring Fatal Influences, Fallon Henley and Jasmine Nix, the Cullings, Izzy Dame and Tanner Paxley, and the team of Soul Group and Zarya for next week. The winners will challenge Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss for the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships. Then we have Darkseid cut a promo explaining their motives in more coherent fashion than anything else they have been involved in, up to this point. But yeah, like as far as that, then next up we have Kelly Armstrong versus Jordan Grace, great match. Pretty solid match. The winner of this match ended up being Jordan Grace. And so after the match, Blake Monroe tried to, appear, but Jordan Grace got her shots in, and even bloodied her. But yeah, as far as that's concerned, then Ava announced Tamina Heights versus Eva Page in a flag match next week. As Ethan was calling himself the most excellent Canadian wrestler. You got the NXT Canadian Championship and all this other type of stuff. And so anytime, kept talking about Ethan being, excellent, all I could think about was Bret Hart. I wish it would have used the Bret Hart gift for that. But yeah, I was like, come on now. Seriously. I'm saying, I was just waiting for, for Bret to make a cameo or whatever. But yeah, like I said, as far as that, but also we have Andre Chase versus Josh Briggs. The winner of this match, Josh Briggs, definitely cashing on that heat that he's been getting right now. So it's just like strike the iron while it's hot. And we have the 8-man tag match, and the winners of this match, Ricky Saints, Obafemi, and Hanga Take, as they defeat Dark State. So as far as that overall, like I say, very very satisfying episode of NXT. And so, so that's pretty much it when it comes to, facts. But yeah, like I said, as far as the wrestling, especially when it comes to NXT, if anything, they never fail. They always knock it out of the park. And so, like I said, as far as that, when it comes to the birthdays, on September 1st, Bam Bam Bigelow would turn 64. On September 2nd, of course, an NFL Hall of Famer, 4-time Super Bowl champion Terry Bradshaw turned 77. Legendary Rams running back, Hall of Famer Eric Dickerson, turned 65. Dempsey Idris, better known as Franklin Saint from Snowfall, turns 34. Of course, on September 3rd, friend of the program, Dr. D, turns 53. Keanu Reeves turns 61. On September 4th, Beyonce turns 44. Xavier Woods turns 39. Comedy legend Damon Wayans turns 65. Jason David Frank, formerly known as Tommy the Green Ranger, would have turned 52. On September 5th, Foxy Brown turns 47. And of course, Wendy Richter turns 64. Of course, on September 6th, September 7th, excuse me. Easy E. Easy E will turn 62. On September 8th, Lorenz Tate turns 50. And on that same day, friend of the program, Janelle from Java Tears, turns 36. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. Of course, September 10th. Matter of fact, I'm jumping the gun as far as the birthdays, but I guess giving you happy birthdays ahead of time. But yeah, that's pretty much when it comes to the birthdays. And so before I go, I would like to give a word of wisdom, and that is, it's not how you start, it is how you finish. And so, the thing is, of course, based on this Sunday's messages, is that if you're going to be a seed, at least get in the hands of someone who knows how to plant the seed. And the thing about it is that, of course, in order for a seed to grow, you have to put it in a place that's conducive for growth. And so the thing is, God sees us as seeds. He views us as seeds in order for us to grow, to become the trees and roots that that He's called us to be. That we have to be in an environment that's conducive for our growth. So even though you may feel like you have dirt that's being thrown on you, it's ultimately for your development. So that even when you find yourself in a situation, God's not going to take you out of the dirt, but He'll let you grow out of it and grow through it. And so, so things that you know, circumstances that you were looking up at, you're looking down on. So that's my word of wisdom. And also remember that you're victorious because greater is He that's in you than he that's in the world. When you put God in the first place, you don't have to worry about being in the last place. Please make sure to listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else that you download podcasts. Of course, you can watch this on YouTube as well. Thank you very much. Like I said, of course, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. And may this day be the very best day of your